camera wasn't, so I don't know.
What'd you do?
My internal camera on my laptop stopped months ago, and so I got one of those put on there. And so I think it's just the connector in it that's busted. I got electrical tape wrapped around it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it, I'm supposed to get a new laptop today, so all's good.
10 minutes? Did she say 10?
Yeah.
I still get meetings.
So, I mean, I already said in a couple. Good deal. You want to do it? I'm not.
I didn't respond at first, but I was working on the Virginia.
Yeah. I think that was an okay response.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to look at one more thing. I called when I was,
Yep.
I was at the office and she said, like, like half an hour today. And then, yeah, but I want to, answer this question. I want to look at one more thing now. Honestly, it was.
We're on the right path.
I think so. Now you said it. Not feel threatened by it.
This is the smaller hurdle.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You're right. It's good. Or, good. In hindsight, it's so good. Yeah, good. All right. And, me too. And I should probably say that to her too, that I raised this.
Yeah.
Available for any questions, but then outside. After the meeting.
Is that okay?
Yeah. We're going to go over that. Sounds good.
She does know everybody, that's for sure. But we have kids similar age, too, in the same neighborhood. We don't go, our kids don't go to the same school, we go to private school. It's nice, there's 3 of us in Raleigh, the other person works for the city, so we've got a lot of. Oh, yeah. St. Paul, Government, and we cover a lot of ground, a lot of miles. Well, now it's not.
Well, I think that that's interesting.
It did.
I think that one time to catch up.
Not, I did not go road. Yeah, trail. It was actually
Over or stone, but
She took her 2 years to get it. I'm not a racer. It took her 2 years. She kept bringing it. I said, no, I'll do it. She's like, okay, great. I already have you signed up. Okay, she's like, just give me a check. So funny. Yeah, that's so Melissa. It is. That actually sounds like something I think she would do. That's fun. Yeah. She's better than she would try to bring her in. Because she would go during the day, you know. Yeah. There was a time where it was set aside each day in office for planting. Oh, that does not surprise me. Yeah, there was a planting.
I would love to do that, but I've never done it with my team, because finance people, like, it's not gonna.
We were an office of all women at the time. I think that made a difference.
She has mentioned that. She's like, it's so random that it's all them.
There's one, the deputy, the civil division that she hired is a man. There are a lot, so. This is kind of funny that it's an office of all women.
That's the sign. She always is sending me my team. Sometimes I'm like, you have to stop now. There's always a new playing challenge or a new, like, thing. Wow, somebody's really tall set.
This is like,
6 feet.
My husband is 6'4", so when I think about 6-foot distancing, I think about him laying on the ground.
Oh.
And then
Hi, Tony. Hey, you ready to go? Do we have
We're gonna try one more time. We're really ready to start. I am going to call the Ramsey County Housing and Redevelopment Authority to order. Let's do a roll call, please.
Carter? Here?
Fretham,
Here.
McDonough. McDonough,
Here.
McGuire,
Here.
Ortega,
Hi.
Reinhardt,
Here.
Modis Castillo.
Here. All right, we have our agenda before you with one item on our agenda. I seek a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call.
Madam
Oh,
Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Reinhardt.
Okay, we just did the approval of the agenda, correct? Did we do the minutes?
No, we haven't done the agenda yet, or the minutes yet. We just got a motion. We just did roll call.
Okay, so when you said we had one item on the agenda, you were talking about approval of the agenda first?
Correct, yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Fretham,
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Modis Castillo.
Aye. Great, and we have the minutes from August 18th as presented before you for approval.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Roll call, please.
Fretham,
Aye.
McDonough,
Aye.
McGuire,
Aye.
Ortega,
Aye.
Reinhardt,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Modis Castillo.
Aye. Thank you. So we have one item for discussion. It is a policy item on conduit bonds and conduit financing for affordable housing. This is an opportunity for us to have a discussion. I just want to give a little bit of background. We will have Jenny Bolton from our bond council here to answer questions. Carrie Collins and Josh are also on if we have questions for staff, but just want to give a little background. Ramsey County, as you all know, has expressed a strong willingness to be a partner in increasing the supply of new affordable and preservation of existing naturally occurring affordable housing, which involves new partnerships earlier this year with participation in the NOAA 2 impact funds, as well new and a renewed use of tools. The county has adopted conduit bond policy. The HRA adopted this policy in 2004, but we have not participated in projects for more than 15 years. The decision to not utilize this tool is not completely known, but for some time there was not a strong need for county participation as the tool tends to reside primarily with cities. Conduit bonds are eligible for affordable housing projects for in between the 30 to 60% AMI. Some of the bond revenue and fees from past projects help fund other CED efforts, including the CEO Next, formerly Economic Gardening. And the county has received an application from the City of St. Paul and a local developer to utilize this tool. St. Paul has several high priority projects and due to demand is unable to assist with them as a result, which is why we're coming before you to say, is it time that we use this tool again? And so we're going to open for discussion. Maybe we'll start with calling on Jenny Bolton if she has anything to add, and then we'll get right into discussion. Jenny? Is she in the chamber?
Madam Chair, she's coming up right now.
Okay, got it. I thought she was on the call, but she's in person, so great. Thank you, Jenny.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. I am Jenny Bolton from Kennedy and Graven. We are bond counsel for the county and its HRA. And that was an excellent summary. That is, the concept of conduit revenue bonds is that this provides access to developers of affordable housing to tax-exempt bonds, which allows them to borrow at a lower interest cost, which because their borrowing is at a lower cost, it makes the project more feasible. And you are correct in that this is primarily run through at the city level, and there are 4 allocators that have their own entitlement allocation, and St. Paul is one of those. Minneapolis, Dakota County, CDA, and MHFA, the state, also have that authority. And at this point, there is so much demand for affordable housing that there are priority projects in St. Paul that cannot be completed with the allocation that St. Paul itself receives. So there is a request for the county to become involved in the process of financing affordable housing.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to commissioners. Jenny, maybe you'll just stand by in case there are more questions.
Okay.
Commissioner McDonough, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm supportive of this. I think this is a good tool to use at this point in time and moving forward. I think we need to be as creative as possible. And I think that being a part of this with the ability to do the conduit financing and all the conversations we've had in so many areas makes really good sense. The one word of caution that I will put out to staff and to the board is conduit financing can be used in so many ways, and there's a lot of pressure from community for us to be a part of that. And it gets hard to say no to friends, right? And there's a lot of reasons to use conduit financing. I know one of the biggest issues for St. Paul, Hennepin does some conduit financing, it's kind of set up similar to us where they charge some fees and stuff, is once that door gets opened, it gets really hard to not justify being able to say yes to everybody who comes knocking on your door. And I think we want to make sure we're thoughtful about it and making sure that, you know, we're partnering where it makes sense for us to partner, where we can help the community, where it makes sense for us to help the community. But sometimes our toughest job is saying no. And I think, you know, opening up this door and exploring this on the affordable housing partnership is a really good spot to start in this area. And it might be as far as we ever go. And that might be the spot where we just really stay and say, this is our role as a county and being able to help with the tools we have available. But I know all of us have been asked by community groups over the years at various times if the county can step up and help them with some projects. And it could even get more complicated because sometimes those projects are actually asking for state funding and they're looking to us to, you know, through the bonding process, and then they're looking for us to manage the project and be conduit financiers, which could be competing with our priorities too. So I just wanted eyes wide open. This could be a rabbit hole if we're not thoughtful and pay attention to what we're doing here as far as moving forward on conduit financing. Madam Chair, I support this. I think you and your team have done a good job teeing this up for us in this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner McDonough, and I always appreciate your words of caution and wisdom as we move forward. So thank you very much. Commissioner Carter, I'll go to you next.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate the write-up on this and the reconsideration of the use of conduit bonds at the county. It makes such good sense based, as Commissioner McDonough has said, on the discussions that we have had, and the write-up certainly aligns with those discussions, in particular in the racial equity impact, the summary of need with 15,000 households more in need at 30% affordable or 30% area median income than our housing available at that level. So this makes plain sense. It also does not affect our credit rating or capacity, and my question is around that. I do note that St. Paul has a limit on what they can do, as I assume other communities do as well. Where does the limit come in? You know, it doesn't affect our ability to bond clearly, but where does the limit come in? What is our limit? Clearly there ought to be criteria, and the alignment with our mission, vision, and values is clear. Commissioner McDonough's warning that we have a way to say yes, but also a way to limit what we do is important. Could you help me to understand what the limits are, how St. Paul is limited, and, you know, what in fact our limits might be in this regard?
Thank you. Jenny?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, the limit is imposed by federal tax law. The federal law imposes a cap on certain types of tax-exempt bonds, and including the issuance of tax-exempt bonds for for-profit owned affordable housing. Yeah, so this kind of housing that's being discussed today falls into that category. That limit is established by population and is allocated to each state. It's not money, it is the authority to issue bonds. And that limit is then administered by state law. And under state law, in the first half of the year, there is a pool that is for affordable housing, one that is for manufacturing, one that is for public facilities like docks and wharves. And then in the second half of the year, that limit is administered through a unified pool. So whatever is left over from the earlier pools gets consolidated into one pool. And that allocation is an amount that is the difference between what is allocated to those four entities that I talked about earlier: Minneapolis, St. Paul, Dakota County, and MHFA. Everybody else who would want to issue would issue from what's left over, and it's then allocated through the state, through Minnesota Management and Budget. So Ramsey County HRA would be in that category of applying to the state for that limit that is available to everybody in the state other than those four issuers. And within the affordable housing, there are multiple categories, and the highest category, the first priority is preservation of housing that has project-based federal assistance, so Section 8 housing, project-based Section 8 housing. And that's most likely the category that Ramsey County HRA would be looking at. So it's a matter of a federal law administered by the state, and then different categories within that administration.
Thank you. Madam Chair, may I follow?
Yes, yes, please, Commissioner Carter.
Just very, very briefly, thank you so much for that explanation. That helps a lot. Can you also tell me, it does note in the application process that all fees are to be paid by the developer prior to submission. And does that include any bond counsel fees as well, so that Ramsey County is totally unimpacted by cost in these transactions?
Madam Chair, can I respond to that? Yes, that is correct. The private party is responsible for all costs of the transaction. So they will pay the fees that are imposed by the Ramsey County HRA's policy, and any transaction costs. So they would pay the cost of bond counsel, and if the bonds are rated, they would pay the rating agency fees. They would pay all the legal costs of all the if there's a trustee, they'd pay the trustee's fees. So they pay all of those costs, and in addition, they would pay a fee to the Ramsey County HRA for the service of providing access to the tax-exempt financing.
Makes sense. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Carter. Commissioner McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this forward. Just a couple of questions on the conduit financing. About how many projects do we do in a year that involves this kind of financing? And do we have I'm reading through all the background materials, do we have a template where if it reaches a certain score, then those are the next projects that are eligible for this? And then do we do it up to our limit each year, or do we just always do it on a case-by-case basis? I'm just observing and listening to Commissioner McDonough's caveats about not using this too often, or just if you could give me a little more history or what our policy is on this.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner McGuire. So we haven't used this tool in 15 years. So I'll just start there. I don't know, Jenny, if you want to respond, or if we have Carrie Collins.
Madam Chair, Commissioner McGuire, if I could just respond to that second piece, not on the timeline side, but on the policy setting piece. So there are a couple of final edits that didn't make it actually into the draft today that ensure that the board is having an annual conversation first that establishes priorities for what types of pieces around conduit financing would be something that we would want to consider, and then ensuring that we stay aligned with those priorities throughout the year. Otherwise, you will do a case-by-case basis as things roll in, and we want to avoid that. There will be a step added in the final policy that comes back for approvals, both before the board first and the HRA second as a part of this process. I apologize, recognizing that it did not get into today's piece. I wanted to highlight that. And so the goal will be to have, the strategic planning time with the board every January is a good time where we will work on establishing that piece. We'll ensure that we have clear priorities. Right now, the intent is around affordable housing. It's not to build art museums, for example. Nothing wrong with art museums, but that leads you down a different road. And we will use that as a way to adhere so that the board has a process by which they're establishing criteria that the HRA can then execute against as a financing entity.
That really helps. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I, too, am supportive of bringing this back. It has been a long time since we have used this particular tool. But as with everything, the devil's in the details and what comes back to us. So I think today we're just discussing it, and so something will be brought back to us. One question, okay, and I'm sure it was covered here, but now I'm getting a little confused because this is the Ramsey County HRA, which doesn't, it's the suburbs. I mean, how can this be used? Can it be used countywide, or is it just in places where there isn't another HRA?
Yes, I'll let you respond, Jenny. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so you would need to work with St. Paul to coordinate the financings that they would prioritize the request through Ramsey County HRA. This is a tool that can be used in other cities as well, but there isn't so much of a need there because other cities in the county would be applying to that same pool through Minnesota Management and Budget. So it isn't a matter of providing an additional mechanism to provide additional housing as it would be in St. Paul. So although it's a tool in other cities, those other cities have that same tool available to them.
Okay, I'm still a little confused by that because there is need in suburban Ramsey County. And we've seen that through a number of different projects that we have looked at recently that we didn't have the certain tools available to provide for some conduit funding. So what I'm hearing you say is that regardless of whether or not there is an HRA in a community, and I think there are at least a couple in the suburbs, if not more, and St. Paul obviously has an HRA. So how will we, if we do this, then it's on a case-by-case basis, but I need to know that since our HRA is covering the areas that don't have HRAs, is my understanding, that there's equal opportunity.
Yeah.
So this is kind of confusing. It sounds like the state makes the decision on whether or not it works, and then if there's capacity within the HRAs, they can do it themselves, but if there isn't, then they can come to Ramsey County?
Yes.
Help me out with
Jenny,
this. Madam Chair and Commissioners, right, so again, this is not a tool that is restricted to an HRA. Conduit revenue bond financing can be issued by cities directly. So whether or not they have an HRA established, they have the ability to use this mechanism. And then it comes down to that limitation that is imposed by federal law and administered by state law, where any issuer that is not one of the four entitlement issuers, the allocators that I mentioned earlier, goes through the same limited pot of money through the state. So the Ramsey County HRA is in the same position as the city of Maplewood, for example, that if there's a project in Maplewood, it could be issued by the city or the county, but there wouldn't really be any reason to go through the county HRA when the city itself could do it.
And the city of St. Paul, and Madam Chair, in this case, the city of St. Paul doesn't have the capacity, is one of the reasons that we're considering it, but there could be other projects where maybe there wouldn't be the capacity depending on what size of I'm thinking most recently of some projects in Roseville that really could have used some conduit funding. So St. Paul doesn't have the capacity to do this then? Why are we stepping in? I think it's a good tool, and I want to bring this forward, but it seems like everything is so concentrated right now on this policy for St. Paul, which I know it goes beyond that, but I just want to make sure that I understand why it seems to be so concentrated or focused on St. Paul.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Reinhardt, that's a good question because this is kind of a unique financial partnership. So as Jenny Bolton stated, the city of St. Paul is their own bond issuer. So they're at capacity in terms of what they can issue, what they can request. They're looking for Ramsey County to kind of top them off to be able to facilitate the projects that they have in the pipeline. However, this is a state allocation, so what Jenny's saying is that the need isn't lesser in the suburbs necessarily. It's just the mechanism to which they request the funds is a little bit different because they have the ability to request, just like Ramsey County is requesting, to use these funds, if that makes sense. So if you think about it, St. Paul's kind of 3/4 full on their cup, and they're asking for Ramsey County to top them off to be able to gap out these projects in the pipeline.
Okay, that actually does make sense to me. And is this policy that will be coming back to us, is it strictly for that pool of funds, or are there other opportunities for conduit funding?
I can defer to Jenny. However, I know that MMB has some kind of a narrow focus in terms of what gets funded. These are competitive funds, which is why Roseville, Maplewood, anybody in the county can request these funds. But they do have parameters to which they fund, and one aspect was mentioned, that affordable housing projects that range between 30 to 60% AMI qualify. And the charge of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority as bond issuer also is charged with financing low to moderate income housing and redevelopment opportunities that reduce blight. So we have to stay within the confines of our charge as well. With that said, they do have kind of a scoring component which can, fund one project over the other. And my understanding, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they tend to lean toward preservation projects to support naturally occurring affordable housing. So even if you make a request to MMB, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the funds because they are so highly competitive.
Okay, well, when this comes back to us, I'd really appreciate more information about how how it would work specifically with St. Paul, because that's why it's coming before us, or will be coming before us. So with the policy, I just want to make sure that the policy fits not just for one particular timeline, but that it would fit for others as well. And I guess I would like to know how that impacts, for example, if we come in and it's for the city of St. Paul, and that's obviously it says what the project is, then what I'm hearing you say is that we are in competition with, or that project is in competition not only with St. Paul, but also with Maplewood, Roseville, the others that may apply for those funds. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about how that works. It sounds to me like that would probably be more at the state level to determine the need and the impact. But I just think it's important that we understand that this is a county-wide issue. In fact, we're trying to make sure that the suburban Ramsey County steps up. And so want to make sure that we have the tool there for them. And I think that this is a good tool, and moving forward with it. But again, I think Commissioner McDonough's, forewarning is that we just have to be very careful. But I think that that's one of the things that we do very, very well in Ramsey County. So I look forward to it coming back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If I can respond to one thing too, and I think having that background information, Commissioner Reinhardt, will certainly provide some clarity. But just a reminder as well that right now we get our federal entitlement programs, community development block grant, and home funds that help serve suburban Ramsey County. So we don't have any direct funds that right now immediately serve the city of St. Paul, and this is kind of one mechanism to do so, as we know that many suburban projects can can receive the benefit of CDBG and home financing for affordable housing, which has its limitations in terms of area median income as well. And so this kind of balances that until we can figure out a more sustainable funding solution moving forward.
Well, Madam Chair,
Sure.
but the fact is the City of St. Paul has those funds coming directly to them through their HRA. So it's not, to me, that's not really balancing it because it's, they have a separate pool of funds for that home and CDBG, I believe, correct?
Correct. They get their own separate allocation. But in terms of just kind of what we can do from a programmatic level, this is something, and again, as Jenny mentioned, we can partner in other ways with other municipalities moving forward. It's just a matter of making sure at this time that we're beginning that conversation around this policy, awareness that the existing policy exists, and to be able to have these questions and conversations so we can bring back a more robust policy at a later date.
And I appreciate that, but I wanted to make sure that if people are listening that they didn't think that somehow St. Paul wasn't getting CDBG and home funds, because they are. It's just that the suburbs have to come through the county in order to get that.
Yes. Yep, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. Commissioner Ortega.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am supportive, have been in the past and today. My only caution is, I feel like I was speaking a little bit in the vacuum. I understand there were criteria in a vision of how we're moving forward will be coming to us. I think the discussion would be more robust then. The one caution I sort of have is that in the past, we've talked about concentration of poverty and so forth. So I just want to make sure that any other policy discussions we've had in the past are sort of integrated into how we're moving forward. And maybe that becomes part of the criteria as to how we decide this and what projects. I guess I'm a little bit sensitive to large, I lived in housing projects, so I'm not a big fan of those. But at the same time, we got to get affordable housing. I just want to make sure that we have a holistic discussion and make sure that we're eyes wide open and not contradicting previous policy discussions we've had. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Ortega. Commissioner Carter, I see your hand up. Oh, we can't hear you.
I think my sound is doing something strange. I hope you can all hear me.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if, I know that when this comes back to us, it will be coming back by way of policy. And then the process for approving will be as it's included in the packet. I also know that as these projects are planned, they don't happen overnight. So just as we're looking to better understand the criteria moving forward, the process moving forward, I wonder if we might also have the opportunity as we begin talking about this in our strategic planning process to think through what we are seeing on the horizon, so as we are able to discuss and ensure our support of projects throughout Ramsey County to the extent that they align to our vision, mission, goals, direction, and that criteria, and that they do not take us above our cap. I am assuming too that the state and its review will have a lot to do with which projects make it through. But if we are able to just look as forward as we can and having had conversations with our communities, it would be very helpful to me as well. So thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Carter, I'd just like to add to that, to Commissioner Ortega's point, and then followed up by yours. The board's been very clear about some of the priorities that already exist as well. And so we are not starting from square one. It's about compiling that information, bringing it here, and then checking ourselves against projects as we move forward so that the board feels comfortable, and then the HRA, as an entity that has an opportunity to levy money in a way that the board cannot, or excuse me, in this case, extend conduit financing in a way the board cannot, can take that step. And so it is in that relationship of the policy alignment with the broader board vision, mission, and goals, which brings in many areas of our organization, and then ensuring that as projects come forward, there is that alignment so that the HRA then acts in accordance with that in ways that the board alone could not. That is the balance that we seek to strike so that we not only learn from where we've been, but we continue to remain in alignment going forward.
Thank you, Ryan. Carrie, do you want to have any closing thoughts before we wrap up today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I think we've got, some direction to review the policy, provide some additional background. I think in a few weeks we'll also be able to maybe have a thoughtful conversation around what may be in the pipeline. But this is a very helpful start to dusting off a very old policy. So I appreciate the conversation today.
Great. Thanks, Carrie, and thank you, Jenny, for answering all of our questions and explaining conduit bond financing. With that, we have no other things on our agenda, and so I'm going to move to adjourn, and then we are moving to a closed session. Madam Chair Carter, do you have anything to add?
Yes, let's take 10 minutes. Oh, well, no, let's take 5 minutes and be back at 11:20.
Okay.
And we will be on the same link unless I hear differently from the county manager.
No, it's a different link.
Oh, it's a different link.
Sorry, we're on a different link?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks, I'm glad I asked.
Yes. Okay.
Teresa?
Yes, Madam. Yes, Commissioner.
So when will this come back to it? When will this policy come back to us? Going back to the HRA.
Yeah. Carrie, do we have a timeline? Sorry.
We're going to try to bring it back as soon as possible because, as noted in the request for board action, that we did receive an application to be able to partner with Common Bond Communities in the city of St. Paul. So we, as early as 3 weeks or as soon as we can kind of get it started through the board system, we'll do that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was coming as soon as possible based on that. Thank you.
Okay, so again, we are going to adjourn. You're going to sign out of this link and log on to your new link. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, Josh.